Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for January 26th, 2024. I've been asked by several viewers, including a regular viewer David, among others, to wait until after the court ruling was given at the International Court of Justice before I do the update today. So I've done that. It's a little after 2 p.m. in the afternoon here in Germany. The court ruling was issued at 1 p.m. I have to say it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's not what should have happened fully, but it's a move in the right direction. Now, I'll read you a little bit of the report that we have so far. And of course, there's much more. We're going to have to parse through the legal language and so on. But what the court declared is that Israel may have committed some acts covered by the legal definition of genocide in Gaza. And then they provided a list of some of the charges from South Africa and acknowledged that these charges are legitimate. They also ruled they will not throw out the charges from South Africa. In other words, they rejected Israel's request that the legal case against it be dropped. Now that's significant because the Israelis were arguing that because of the attacks on Israel on October 7th, they have a just right to defend the security of their country from terrorists, and therefore you cannot consider the military action against Gaza to be genocide. The court definitively rejected that. Now, the reading of the decision came from Joan Donoghue, who's the International Court of Justice president. And she said that while the court has not yet decided if Israel has violated the Genocide Convention, and that this will require more study over many months ahead, what's clear is from what she did say that they have concluded that Israel has violated the core content of the convention. So it did confirm that Israel has committed acts which are in violation of the prohibitions from the international law under the Genocide Convention of 1948. She read that the court agrees that South Africa's claims of human rights violations are justified and that the case is urgent enough that provisional measures should be issued against Israel. These measures would force Israel to take some, quote, effective measures to prevent further genocidal acts from taking place within Gaza. So there you have it. They're basically saying that Israel must stop genocidal acts from taking place inside Gaza. They also said that Israel must take effective measures against the destruction of evidence of potential acts of genocide. In her ruling, she read the quotes from a number of Israeli officials, including President Herzog, Prime Minister Netanyahu, the defense minister, and others, which she said were incitement to acts against the Palestinian people, and that these incitements must stop. It also said there must be more aid allowed in, and described from the language of UN observers and US officials that the situation for the Palestinian people has been disastrous, tragic, horrible, death and destruction, disease, danger of starvation. So the case was presented in full, that was presented in full by the South Africans, was largely taken by the court as legitimate. So this is a significant defeat for the Greater Israel fanatics who are at the center of the Netanyahu regime in Israel. Now, they did mention that Netanyahu said that they will continue this war. So Israel must respond within 1 month to this ruling. So one of the questions from a number of viewers is what would be the implication if there's a ruling against Israel? Well, the most important thing is that Israel is now officially isolated, that Israel has been called to the Court of Justice over its action of collective punishment of the Palestinians. The United States, if it continues to support Israel with weapons, with money, with political cover, then the U.S., by implication, would become a partner in genocide, though not by a legal ruling, which means that not only will Israel be isolated, but the United States will be isolated, as will the United Kingdom. Now, before the court issued its ruling, the non-aligned movement essentially said the same thing, that these actions must stop, there must be justice, there must be an end to the genocide, and the non-aligned movement conference had close, I think, over 100 nations attending. And what this means is that the global majority, as it's been defined with the Global South, the BRICS 10, and so on, is clearly asserting legal evidence of genocide under the Genocide Convention of 1948 and insisting that Israel stop. Now, will Israel stop? Will Netanyahu stop? Well, the big question is, will the United States use its significant leverage to stop Netanyahu from committing genocide? That remains to be seen, but it's not just something we should sit back and watch. There's an election coming up in the United States. Biden has put himself into a situation of facing multiple war fronts in the Middle East. There are rumors now that the United States is going to pull its troops out of Iraq and Syria, which would be a positive step, but not sufficient. The idea is that they would do it to protect American lives. Well, the fact is that the American troops are there without authorization from Iraq or Syria. There's a flotilla of U.S. warships in the Eastern Mediterranean. So the threat of a U.S. involvement and action in that region, as well as what we've seen in the Red Sea, is a real danger for Biden, especially when he's so unpopular and facing re-election. It should be noted additionally that the Houthi movement, which is targeting especially Israeli-related ships in the Red Sea, has said that they're doing this as an action to stop the genocide in Palestine. So now we have the International Court of Justice essentially saying that this does appear to be genocide and it should stop. Well, what will the U.S. do? How can the U.S. proclaim itself to be the defender of the so-called rules-based order if the international court, the world court, rules that this is unacceptable? Will the U.S. continue to support it? And that's something that we have to bring up, that all people committed to ending these kinds of injustices have to speak out and demand that the U.S. government stop supporting genocide. Now, I think that's the most important question there. The question of will Israel comply? Israel is very concerned about what the U.S. believes and thinks. Netanyahu has basically thumbed his nose at the United States, but I think that's, in a sense, pre-planned. There's this scenario that was drafted by the Wolfowitz crowd, the ones who came up with the original idea of the unipolar order, which was called the breakaway ally scenario, which said that Israel will take actions that will force the United States to come in defense of Israel. And what's the primary action that would be? War against Iran. The question is not whether there are Americans stupid enough to support that. There are. Many in the Congress are insisting that the situation in Southwest Asia is the fault of Iran and the U.S. must attack Iran. John McCain, of course, was famous for that, Lindsey Graham and others. But an actual war with Iran right now is not in Iran's interests, nor in the interests of the United States. But that doesn't mean that Biden won't put us into that situation. So this must become a rallying cry for people who are committed to the establishment of a new security order. And those of you who have been writing to me about this, who have been talking about it, who have been participating with the International Peace Coalition, now is the time to escalate. Make sure that everything we put up on our website related to this is shared, that you get it out to as many people as possible. Now, a second question that came in is, if the court rules in favor of South Africa and against Israel, is it possible that action can be taken retroactively to hold people like Tony Blair, Dick Cheney, George W. Bush responsible for genocide in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, and so on? Well, it should. There should be cases against them. The problem is, again, the jurisdiction of the court is somewhat limited. I don't know if there is a statute of limitations, but I also know that we've been now 20 years since the launching of these permanent wars in the Southwest Asia, actually 23 years, and nothing has been done for accountability. Rather than waging a fight for accountability in the past, what must be done is to insist that nations become accountable today for their actions. And that's the case with Ukraine, that's the case with Gaza, that's the case with Iran, and so on. So we can take this principle of non-intervention in the affairs of other nations and make that the basis of what US and Western European policy should be. Now, I just have time for one other question that came in from Gary, who was concerned about the reports that the Federal Reserve is now buying up corporate bonds and other kinds of financial instruments. And he asked if that's ever been officially approved. Well, it was approved by the Federal Reserve, which is a non-governmental agency. It's a private central bank that acts on behalf of the interests of the private banks, not the American people, not the US government. And this specific purchase order of buying corporate bonds, the authorization for that came in 2020 during the explosion of the repo crisis, the repurchase crisis, where banks were buying and selling bonds on short notice overnight to get money to loan to corporations that had overnight loans due. That's what the repo market is all about. And when the commercial banks stopped loaning money against the bonds that were held by their clients, the Federal Reserve stepped in to avoid a blowout of the financial system in 2019, 2020. And they set up something called the Secondary Market Corporation Credit Facility. And it was initially authorized to buy $750 billion worth of corporate bonds. It's now gone way above that, and it's continuing to exist. Why? Because many, many corporations should be put through bankruptcy reorganization because they have debts that will never be covered. But if you do that, you have to admit that the financial system is bankrupt. There's no way, it's not just the 33 trillion in federal debt, but you have corporate debt, you have private sector debt, you have state and municipal government debt. There's no way to cover all this debt. And if you start calling it in or forcing payments at not the face value of these instruments, but the actual market value, you realize how this system is a pile of worthless debt. And so to prevent a blowout of that sort, especially in an election year, the Fed is going to lower interest rates probably in the months ahead and pump a lot of money with what is essentially a liquidity policy to give liquidity to back up worthless financial instruments in overnight dealings to avoid bankruptcy. Is that legal? Well, the Federal Reserve is authorized to do such things, but this is something that should be heard by the Congress. It should be stopped by the Congress. And just as the continuation of the funding of war in Ukraine, the support for Israel should be challenged by the American people, so should the financial manipulations and fraud conducted by the Federal Reserve. And so, Gary, the answer to your question is that the official approval has come from the Federal Reserve, which is, again, an unaccountable agency, unless the Congress asserts its constitutional right to take that power away from the private banks. And that's the kind of fight we need to have in an election year. So again, by Monday, we'll have more on this International Court of Justice ruling. Preliminarily, I think they punted on ordering a ceasefire, which should have been done, but they did confirm what most of the world knows, which is that there is a genocide being committed against the Palestinians. And the effort to stop people from talking about this, the kind of censorship we're seeing, it also verges on something which is a crime against humanity. So thanks, excuse me. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you again next week. Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and Weekly Magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.